Welcome back, my beautiful people, beautiful audience, to the BambooSZN podcast. I'm your host, sober wellness coach Dorian Wormsley, and this podcast is sponsored by Dorian Wormsley Wellness, a coaching business to help you create and build a strong body and clear mind. Now, if you didn't know, this podcast is about stories of transformation and growth. My guest and myself share our stories of when we planted that seed of change. We took actionable steps to make that change come to life, and now we're living in our growth, which it never ends. Just like the story of the bamboo, if you're not familiar with it, you plant that seed, you water it, fertilize it for 3 to 5 years. You might not see the growth until year 5, but the goal is to continue to do the action and just trust that growth is going to come. Now, my guest today is an amazing woman. I had met her a few years ago when I was a coach at Orange Theory Fitness. She is a mother of 6, a gym rat, and also captain of the Safe Neighborhoods Bureau here in Las Vegas with the Las Vegas Metro Police Force. I bring you Michelle Tavarez.
How are you, buddy?
I'm living the dream, girl, one day at a time. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking.
Now, like I mentioned earlier, I want to say your first class at Orange Theory might have been with me.
It's definitely possible. I honestly don't remember.
I don't remember either, but I was thinking about it when we talked about coming on the show. I think it might have been. But anyways, first I want to shout out to Sasha.
Yep.
Shout out Sasha Larkin, amazing fucking woman, man, beast. Both you guys. I think she introduced you to Orange Theory, and
she
then
did.
You came on, and instantly I loved having you guys in my classes because you were some of the people who every second wanted something more challenging. Like I didn't have to, which I love coaching people like that, to where I can turn my back and I don't have to worry about that person taking it easy or whatever. You guys were just full force, and like I used to love having you guys in there to where you guys ask for music change, I'll change the fucking music for you guys. I don't care, because you guys love to work so hard, and yeah, just badasses. And then to find out you guys are cops, I was like, oh shit, they're fucking cops. And after that, I just stayed in contact with you guys over the years. We've been able to remain, acquaintances and everything. And I just saw you at Your Bold is Beautiful. You were speaking, telling a little bit of your story. And it made me think, I was like, as long as I've known you, and we chit chat during the gym and the workouts, I never got to really know your full story of how you became an officer, different things you've been through in life. And that's why I wanted you to come on here and share a little bit of, how you got to where you are now and where you want to go. So if you could just tell us a little bit, Michelle.
Absolutely.
Who are you? Who is Michelle Tavarez?
Oh, that's a very deep question. I'm excited to be here, and thanks for giving me the opportunity to share my story. I was born and raised here in Las Vegas, a Vegas native. I was born and raised into a law enforcement family. My father hired on with the Las Vegas Metro Police Department when I was about a year old, but I never really planned to be a police officer. It wasn't what I wanted to do. It wasn't my passion. And my mother joined the agency when I was in junior high, I think it was, as a civilian employee on our department. I was attending school to be a teacher, actually. I really wanted to. I have a passion for teaching, which makes complete sense now in my leadership role. But I end up joining the agency as a temporary employee, a civilian employee, but a temp. So I only worked 19 hours a week. But I got to make my own hours. So I got to navigate it around my school, which was great. I loved that aspect of it. And it paid more than most part-time jobs would pay a 19-year-old kid.
Yeah.
I was excited. I quickly realized, if I ever want to move out of my mom's house, I guess I better get a real job. So I then became a law enforcement support technician, which is another civilian opportunity that we have on our police department. They do a lot of the clerical work. They're in police records. They're in the jail. They're at the area commands. They take reports. They do all sorts of things. A huge asset to us on the commission side. I did that. And while I was doing that, I was in a criminal justice class. It was just a prereq for my degree. And in this criminal justice class, the instructor said, hey, I want everyone to go around and say your name and say if you know anybody or your friends anybody on Metro, because he worked for the department.
Okay.
So it gets to me. And I'm like, I'm Michelle Tavarez. My dad works for the department. My mom works for the department. My sister works for the department. My stepmom works for the department. My stepdad works for the department. And it's like, oh my gosh.
Oh, wow.
So we move and we get a couple people ahead of me when I'm all done. And I hear this guy with this southern drawl. And he's like, my name's Lawrence Gibson, and I work for Michelle's dad at Southwest Area Command. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy works for my dad. So when class ended, I was like, I want to go meet him. I walk up and I introduce myself, and he was like, hey, come on a ride along with me. And I'm like, I'm good. I know what cops do. Like, he said, no, it'll be fun. We'll go have lunch with your dad. I was like, oh, okay. I like my dad. So that sounds like a good time. So he takes me on this ride along and we go to lunch. And I wish I could remember the restaurant. I just remember it was on the west side, like Durango area. And we're sitting there. We just ordered. And at a table across from us, this lady stands up and slaps this guy in the face and goes, fuck you. And I'm like a 20.
Slaps who?
The guy in front of her.
Oh,
and
okay.
I'm just like a 22-year-old, like naive kid. And I'm like, ah. And my dad jumps up and Gibby jumps up and they run over there and they take her into custody and she ends up going to jail for domestic violence because it was her boyfriend.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened. I'm not here to speculate, but Gibby looks at me. He's like, hey, get the check. We got to go. I'm like, okay. So I'm like calling the waitress over and we take her down to jail. We do the booking process, process her through. We leave, we go to get gas. And he's like, all right, we're going to head back to the station. That's it. And I was like, wait, this is what you guys do all day? He's like, yeah, pretty much. And I'm like, I'm in.
Yeah.
I was hooked from that moment on. I was like, I got to do this. I went through the process at the time. It was a bit more difficult than it is now, just timing wise. And, we had to fill out like an interest card because they weren't always doing applications. Like right now we're hiring a lot. We're actually almost fully staffed, which is great for our agency. And not a lot of police departments can say that, but that's a testament to our sheriff and the morale boost that he's done on our department. So at that time, I do all the paperwork, and I remember telling my dad, I was like, hey, we were watching an old video. He used to be a sergeant in the academy. And if you have law enforcement in your family, when you graduate the academy, they'll let your law enforcement family member pin your badge on your chest. So I remember telling my dad, I was like, hey, maybe you could do that for me one day. And he's like, do what? And I was like, pin a badge on my chest. And he goes, okay, honey. I said, oh, no, I've been thinking about like applying for police recruit. And he's like, oh, I'll believe that when I see it. And he just kind of brushed me off. And I was like, oh, he's not taking me serious.
Real quick, at this point, did you see or know of any female police officers?
I had met some. Okay. Like my dad's second wife was a female police officer. So was his third, actually, female police officer. But I was around cops all the time. Yeah. But I never really paid attention because I wasn't going to be a cop. Okay, gotcha. So I didn't care. You know, I was just like, oh, these are dad's friends. I thought nothing of it. So now I go and I apply and I fill out my application. And when I was done, I was like, hey, Dad, just so you know, I applied for police recruit. He was like, what? I said, I told you I was going to. And he's like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. So of course, then, he did everything he could to try to, he's still to this day my best mentor that I've ever had. But that's kind of how I got onto the department, how I became a police officer. Some people dream about it their whole lives. And me, I kind of fell into it. As I got onto the agency, I learned a lot. Again, I hired on 22 years old. Well, I was 23 when I went through the academy, but naive to a lot of things in the world. My parents did a good job of keeping me sheltered. So naive to a lot of things. I had to learn a lot of things very quickly. And much like most young 20-somethings, thought I was invincible, thought, oh, I'll never die and all the things. So I'm very grateful that I'm still here because it was a different time of policing and we didn't have a lot of the training back then that we have now to keep us safe. Yeah. But I'm navigating my way through the agency and I really, really wanted to go be a TAC officer. They're the ones that teach the new recruits. They're the ones in the academy that, you see on TV yelling and running them down, doing the PT. But I loved teaching. That bug for teaching hadn't left. So I was like, I want to be a TAC officer. But in 2008, if you remember, the economy tanked. So we weren't hiring anybody. We went on a hiring freeze. And I was like, well, shoot. I'm not going to try to go to the academy and just write lesson plans. That's not what I'm looking for. So I decided to go the investigative route and I became a detective. Went into missing persons and then sexual assault and then promoted out of there to sergeant. I remember telling my dad as I was getting ready to promote, I said, Dad, my only regret is that I never was a TAC officer. And he said, well, honey, just go back as a sergeant. And I don't know why that thought never crossed my mind, but he planted that seed and I was like, you know what? That's what I'm going to do. So I promoted to sergeant, went back out on the streets, did what I needed to do in patrol, went to recruiting because I knew that was going to be a great step to getting to the academy, and then ultimately went into the police academy during one of our biggest hiring pushes this agency has ever seen. We were trying to hire 600 officers in a year. Damn. To give you some perspective, we usually hire about 100 or so through attrition, through retirements. That year, because we were trying to make up for our hiring freeze, we were looking to do 600. So they ramped up the amount of staff we had in the academy, and lucky me, I got in. And I was so happy I did because it truly was my dream job. It's everything. I mean, they paid me to work out, yell at people, and tell my war stories. What more is there? So I did that. While I was an officer, a detective, and a sergeant, I held 2 adjunct positions on the agency. One was a collateral writer for our mounted unit back when we had the horses, and the other was a crisis negotiator. So I would respond out, barricades, suicidal subjects, the jumpers that you would sometimes see, hostage situations. I would respond out with the team to all of those. And I did that for 6.5 years. Promoted to lieutenant in 2018. When you promote to lieutenant, there's only one lieutenant on the team, and that's the team leader. So I had to leave the negotiation team. But I did get the luxury of coming back about a year later as the backup team leader, which was great. I had a great time leading the team then. Promote to lieutenant, everything starts in patrol. So back to patrol I went to Southeast Area Command. Then over to Summerlin. I got to open Summerlin Area Command in January of 2020. That's about when I joined Orange Theory.
Yeah.
Up there in Summerlin and Flamingo area. And then became the administrative lieutenant there, which is kind of like the backup to the captain. From there, I promoted to captain. And that was 3 years ago now. Actually, 3 years ago this month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so promoted to captain 3 years ago. They put me in charge of Spring Valley Area Command, which was, gosh, such a great place to work. Amazing cops I had. Great civilians and citizens that lived there that I got to work with, the honor and pleasure of meeting. It was 170-ish thousand residents, 44 square miles. I had 191 commissioned and civilian employees that worked for me.
Oh, wow.
The tourist corridor known as Chinatown over there on Spring Mountain. Absolute perfect place to start my captain career. I did that for about 1.5 years, and then as a captain, the sheriff decides where you work. He moved me over to major violators narcotics. Then they did a revamp. So about 3.5, 4-ish months ago, they did a revamp and they created the Safe Neighborhoods Bureau, which is where I'm at now. And that encompasses narcotics, gangs, vice, our violent crime gun unit, and then our crime gun intelligence center. So a lot of cool stuff that I get to do. I have really, really great people, amazing detectives that I get to work with. It's a pretty cool gig. I'm not complaining.
Damn, that's fire. And hold on. So there's a lot to unpack right there. Okay, so right now you're the captain of
Safe Neighborhoods.
Now, are you still like in the street?
No, captains, we don't get to be the doers anymore. We don't get to have all the fun that our patrol cops do. We're more like the face.
Yeah.
We're the connection between the community and our folks. My job, the way I view my job as a captain, is to make the job of the people above me easier and to move barriers to make the job of the people below me easier. That's really what I do.
Okay.
Put out fires, when something happens or something, it's to provide that leadership and make sure that when a lot of things are going on at one time, that you can look at it from like that 10,000 foot view and give your cops, or in my case, detectives, the viewpoint to look from that they might not be able to see because they're in it. They're doing it.
And do you ever get like the itch or kind of like miss being out
all the
on
time.
patrol?
So I love to ride with my folks.
Yeah.
I did it in Spring Valley. I did it in Major Violators Narcotics, and I do it in Safe Neighborhoods. One, I miss it. I really miss police work. We don't get to have all the fun anymore. But two, I get insight into what's going on and what my guys need and what they're thinking. As a leader, especially as you move up in the ranks, you get removed from some of the issues or problems or even the good stuff that happens regularly with the line level folks. You have a responsibility to go out there and be with them. I would love to do it more, but there are demands to my job. So unfortunately I can't, but I go out and I ride as much as I can, and it's a great experience.
So, and what's interesting is that your father was officer, right?
Yeah, he retired as a captain.
And then who else was it?
My mother.
Worked as a civilian.
So my mother was a civilian. She started in records, but moved up the chain to become a supervisor on the civilian side, and then eventually became an abuse and neglect specialist, which is it's a job title we don't have anymore.
Okay.
But she was a civilian that had police powers and could make arrests.
So what's interesting is that you had that around you, but you still didn't want to be a cop.
No.
Was it because of just what you saw your dad go through when you're growing up, or did he, while you're growing up, was he kind of like making sure to push to not do that?
He never pushed me, but he did a really good job of shielding me. I didn't know a lot of what my dad dealt with on the agency
Really?
as a police officer. When I told him my interest in it, we had some real conversations about what I was going to experience. I remember him telling me before I went into the academy, he said, honey, you're going to deal with a lot of stuff out on the streets, but I want you to remember that you're going to inherit some of my friends and all of my enemies, and you need to be prepared for that.
Shit.
Yeah.
That's real, because I didn't even think about that. You said that, because there's probably people out there who hate him for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And then the people who love him, and then they're, oh, you're his daughter?
Not everybody. I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea.
Yeah.
I try my best to be a really good leader, but accountability matters, and you have to hold your people accountable. And I've absolutely had to, relieve people of duty or admin transfer them out of units. It's not fun. It's actually the least favorite part of my job. But I have a responsibility to do that, because if I don't, that cancer will spread to the other people that work with them. That's not fair.
And with your career, I don't know the statistics exactly, but to my knowledge, it's pretty much a male-dominated field of work. Were there any like struggles or things you had to like deal with as being a female coming up in the ranks? Men being jealous or talking shit like, oh, she only got it because her dad, or she's only here because her dad knows so-and-so. You know what I mean? Or
I heard that all the time. Yeah.
Trying to haze you or anything?
Hiring on as a temp employee working 19 hours a week. Someone said to me, did your dad get you this job? And I remember responding back. I was a little mouthier back then, but I responded back and I said, if my dad got me a job, I would have asked for one with more hours. Like, what are you talking about? Did my dad give? I had to apply just like everybody else.
Yeah.
I had to put in the work, and there were a lot of times I had to work twice as hard. One, because I was a woman, or two, because of who my dad was.
Wow.
As a female, I had to prove myself to every squad I went to. But what's great is there are a lot of amazing men on my agency that really support women. I remember I was riding mounted unit on New Year's Eve one day. So I was on horseback, and I rode by a guy that I had worked with we called it the problem solving unit, but it was like plain clothes at the area command. And I rode by him and I was talking to him, and the guy next to him said, oh, did your dad get you on mounted? And he looked over at him, and I didn't say anything. He laid into that guy. And he was like, she got there on her own. Like, he started to go at, I was like, wow. So there are some really amazing people that knew how hard I worked, saw the effort that I put in, and supported me for those reasons. Yeah. But yes, I mean, male-dominated industry, law enforcement historically is only about 10 to 12% female. That's across the nation.
Wow.
And that statistic hasn't changed much over the last couple of decades. You can speculate as to the reasons why. I believe a lot of it is shift work, and then society still kind of puts a lot of the pressure on the women to raise children. It's not easy. I can tell you firsthand, it's not easy to be pregnant and be a cop. I can promise you that. I went through a lot of different issues when I was pregnant on the agency. Some were incidental, people violating my rights and they didn't mean to. Some were purposeful because they thought I was, trying to avoid maybe probation or I don't know what. But I dealt with a lot because of that. One of the philosophies that I really try to live by, people are going to talk shit no matter what you do. You cannot let it get to you. I've lived it. I remember when I tested for sergeant, they rank us when we test for things. You do a written, then you do an oral interview, and you do like kind of a tactical like performance type thing. Those are our 3 types of tests. And then all of your scores added up and they rank you 1 to whatever. When I tested for sergeant, now the first time I failed, which was a great learning lesson for me. We learned so much from our failures. The second time, with my chip on my shoulder, I'm like, I'm not testing a third time. I end up coming out number 2. And I called up one of my mentors and I was so excited. I was like, I got number 2. And she was like, oh, that's so much better than number 1. I was like, what are you talking about? And she goes, oh, everybody talks shit about number 1. And I was like, what? Now, mind you, I was still young on the agency. I was like, I don't understand. Well, sure enough, when I tested for lieutenant, I end up getting number 1. And I heard it. Oh, they just needed more women. They don't have enough women in rank. Like, that was it. It couldn't have been that I worked really hard at it. But again, if you listen to what other people say, I mean, gosh, you'll never do anything in your life. A lot of people want to sit and pull people down to their level rather than try to rise up to yours.
Do you, when you were coming up through the ranks and all these things you're going through, at any point was your father trying to shield you from things that were going to come? Or was he more so like, I'm gonna let you learn, and you're gonna see
My
your own
dad-
experience.
My dad did a really good job of, we kept work away from home.
Nice.
I would sometimes call him. I remember calling him once and I said, Dad, I just need you to be my dad and not a captain. And he said, okay, what do you got? And I went on to complain about whatever it was that I was mad about at the time. And he just listened. There were plenty of times that he was like, what, do you want my help? I'm like, nope, doing it on my own. I never accepted what he did behind the scenes. I can't answer.
Yeah.
I've asked him, hey, did you ever interfere with my career? And he tells me no. But I don't know. I don't know for sure. He is a dad and I'm a mom, so I get that.
Yeah.
But I never overtly asked him for help. He did a really good job of providing me advice. I would get advice from him on a regular basis, especially when I made a mistake. I would go to him and say, how do I fix this? How do I be better? How do I not do this again? He was great for that.
Now, you mentioned a few seconds ago about, we talked about touching on how, being a female, coming up through the ranks, the challenges, and I know you mentioned at the event, but just now you also mentioned you were pregnant while on the force. If you could touch a little bit about that, like how it was being pregnant. It was more than one time, right?
4.
4 times you're pregnant.
Mama's 6, but 2 are bonus kids.
Okay.
My girlfriend's got 2 boys.
Okay, gotcha.
I gave birth to 4 on my own. And so I had them when I met my now girlfriend.
Okay.
I gave, my first one was born in 2013 and I was a detective at the time.
Okay.
I was just transferring over to missing persons. And some part of me knew, don't tell anybody you're pregnant until you get there. And I didn't. And I remember telling my boss eventually, he was a sergeant. I remember telling him eventually, and he was like, you have to go light duty right now. And I was like, I don't think I do. But there was a lot I didn't know because it was my first baby.
Yeah.
And I don't, by the way. My doctor puts me light duty when they feel you need to go light duty. And at the time I was sitting behind a desk in a bureau where you don't even deal with suspects. It's not a crime to go missing. So there was no reason for me to go light duty, but he panicked. So when I say some people violated my rights unknowingly, he was one of them. He was a very kind man, best of intentions. He wasn't trying to force me to do something that he technically couldn't force me to do. It was just a mistake.
Yeah.
And I know mistakes. I make plenty of them. So I never harbor any ill will. Plus, the more hate that you have eats you up more than anything it will ever do to anybody you're against, really. So I try to live in a space of understanding and empathy. And in that case, even at that time, I was like, I just don't think he understands what's going on. Like, I don't think he gets this. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. But the second time I promoted, the second time I was pregnant, I was in sexual assault. I really wanted to have a big family. And I didn't have my first kid till I was 30. So I knew I need to have these babies.
I need to pump these things out.
At 35, you become what they call AMA, advanced maternal age. So basically just a nice way of saying you're old and pregnant. And I was like, I got to have these babies like quick. And my first 2 were only 16 and a half months apart. So I gave birth and then gave birth again.
Oh, yeah.
What happened was I told you I failed the sergeant's test the first time. They retested very quickly. And I was like, if there's ever going to be a time for me to test, it's now. Before I ever got pregnant, I asked another mentor of mine. I remember asking her, hey, I really want to test for sergeant, but I want to have a baby. Which one should I do? Like, how did you know when to have a family? And she said, do them both. I said, but what happens if I'm pregnant when it's time to promote? And she goes, the agency will figure it out. She said, you don't know that you're going to get pregnant and you don't even know that you'll pass the test. Do them both. So I did. I ended up getting pregnant and I tested and I did well. And I was about 7.5 months pregnant when they went to promote me to sergeant. I knew better. We had a policy at the time saying that you couldn't be light duty and transfer. So I was full duty. I stayed full duty in sexual assault. I didn't have suspect contact. My team helped with the bad guys. I did everything on my job the right way. And then I went light duty after I promoted and I went out there. I wore a shoulder holster. It was different times back then, but I wore a shoulder holster, big belly. I still qualified with my firearm and I went out and did my job as a sergeant. And the agency, we wouldn't do that now. We would never allow that.
So you were still like out in the streets.
I wasn't having any suspect contact, but I would show up on scenes after everything was static.
That'd be the cutest thing to see.
I'll never forget walking through, I want to say we had a shooting over in our Bolden Area Command, which is the west side. But I remember walking through pregnant, and some woman going, oh my gosh, that Popo pregnant. And I just turned and looked at her. I said, yes, I am. And she was like, you go, girl. And then I walked on to go do what I needed to do as a sergeant.
Yeah.
You know, make sure that crime scene tape was up and all the things.
Yeah.
But again, different times. This was 10 years ago now. Yeah. But I did have some issues with my lieutenant. He was a brand new lieutenant, and he had some struggles because it creates a manpower issue. You have to have what we call a hard stripe, which is a full duty sergeant on at all times. And it is a struggle for the other people around me. Not my desire, obviously, but something I can't help. And he had some issues. He never overtly, I don't think, really violated my rights, but he definitely said some things that he shouldn't have said.
Yeah.
And again, I stood up for myself. I finally got to a point where I was done with it, and I made a comment back, and he kind of backpedaled, and that was that. I didn't have an issue with him after that. Again, I went out, did my job, had my baby, came back, did my job, just never asked for anything special, just wanted to have my family.
Yeah.
All the while, by the way, I was still a crisis negotiator, responsible for responding on call outs and doing all of it. So I was balancing a lot, but it was all well worth it. It was my 4th pregnancy that I really had the issues. My 3rd one, I was in recruiting, and my boss was amazing, though he didn't have any children, so he was scared to death. Every time I would lift a box, he's like, you can't pick things up. I'm like, LT, it says 8 pounds right on the box. I can lift up to 20. I got it.
Yeah.
But he was so sweet and kind. He was just looking out for me. But my 4th is where I really hit probably the biggest adversity I experienced on the department. I was a sergeant in the academy at the time. I really didn't think I would do as well on the test as I did. I really thought I'd be like between 5 and 10. I was testing against amazing people. People who are still, captains on this agency now, chiefs now on this agency, just really qualified, good people. So I didn't put myself at the same level as them. And I was supposed to test. I was still on the fence, but they were supposed to test for lieutenant in December of that year. And then, for captain in December of that year and lieutenant in February. But they ran out of captains on the captain test, so they flip-flopped the tests. And they pushed the lieutenant's test off until February. Well, I got pregnant in October. So there was no hiding my pregnancy by the time I tested. I got a reasonable accommodation. You test in uniform, but I got a reasonable accommodation. They said, no problem, you don't have to wear a uniform. You're good. Do the test. I did the test. As I said, I ended up getting number 1. I was shocked.
While pregnant.
Ooh,
I know they were pissed.
I was shocked. I didn't expect it even myself.
Yeah.
And I had some really good supporters, people that tested with me that were very proud of me and said all the right things, still to this day are my friends. And I know they support me. It wasn't just lip service. But I knew, here we go. The sheriff at the time, it was customary that the sheriff make the phone calls to tell you that you're promoting. So he calls me and he says to me, Michelle, you're going to promote. I'm going to make you a lieutenant. And I was super excited. And we weren't best friends by any means.
Lieutenant or captain?
I was testing for lieutenant. So that's when they were promoting me to lieutenant.
Gotcha.
We weren't best friends by any means, but I understood his humor. He has a really dry sense of humor.
Yeah.
So he kind of makes this joke to me about the pregnancy, and then he's like, huh, and he laughs. And I was like, okay. So I laugh back, and, it's all well and good. And I hang up the phone. I'm like, okay, I got about 2 weeks, and then I'm going to be a lieutenant. Let's make this happen. Now, at the time, I was 8 months pregnant. 8 months pregnant. I'm getting ready to graduate this academy class. It's 2 days before graduation. The Wednesday before the Saturday I'm supposed to promote. The day before graduation, actually, we were graduating on Thursday. And I get a phone call from HR. And he says, Michelle, are you sitting down? I said, I'm not, but it's okay. Just tell me what you got to tell me. And he's like, well, they're not going to promote you on Saturday. And I don't have all the reasons. I don't know all the reasons. If you have any questions, you can call health and safety. And, you could fight this, but this is coming directly from the sheriff. That's what he told me. And I got off the phone. And, the first thing I did, because I was 8 months pregnant with a girl, by the way, was go into my office, close the door, and cry. Because all the emotions, all the hormones flowing through me. So then I was like, okay, you got to get yourself together, Michelle. You're a doer. You can have your moment, but now let's jump into action. I called my union rep, and she said, well, call health and safety and see what they say. I called health and safety, and of course, they wouldn't tell me it was because I was pregnant, but they also wouldn't tell me it wasn't because I was pregnant. And so we had this back and forth, and I tell her, I'm like, yeah, they they won't really give me a reason, just that I can go and go have my baby and come back and they'll promote me after. But they couldn't answer the questions about what my seniority would look like or, any of these other things. So I then called a couple of mentors and I asked my mentors, what do I do? And I got the same advice. They said, don't fight it, Michelle. I said, don't fight it. There was a time on this department when if you pushed back, we called it you got put in timeout.
Like blackballed?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Things are drastically different now. But back then, you would get blackballed. You would get put in timeout. And so they told me, you'll never go anywhere on this agency again if you fight it.
Damn.
Now, mind you, my mentors had been on even longer than me. So they experienced adversity that I can't even fathom. So where they were coming from, when you talk about getting blackballed, even my experience was nothing like theirs. So I understand why they gave me the advice they did, but it didn't sit well with me. So I called my union rep back and I said, listen, I don't want to sue this department. I love this agency. I'm not looking for any money. All I want is what I earned. That's it. And she said, okay, let me talk to the sheriff. The next day I get a phone call from her and she says, I spoke with the sheriff and I asked him, do you know what's going on with Michelle? And he said, I have no idea what you're talking about. She said, that's funny because they said it was coming from you. He's like, I don't know. She tells me all this and she says, hey, I talked to him. He said he was going to look into it, but I warned him he was going to see you at graduation today. I said, okay. She's like, I don't know if he's going to say anything or not. I said, okay. So I was mentally preparing myself for, seeing the head of my agency.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he comes in. He comes backstage and I'm sitting back there with my TAC officers and my lieutenant. And he says, Michelle, come talk to me. I said, okay. And the whole way, all I'm thinking the whole way as we're walking towards this dark corner behind stage is, no matter what he says to you, just don't cry. That's all I was thinking. All of the hormones going through my pregnant body. And all I was thinking is, no matter what, just don't cry. So he looks at me and he says, oftentimes when unpopular decisions are made, people just put my name on it. You're still going to promote on Saturday. And he promoted me. I'll never forget it. I had somebody ask me, well, do you believe he really didn't know? I said, I absolutely believe him. At the time, we had 6,000 employees. I said, he could have sent 5,998 people to deliver that message to me. But he did it himself. That says something about who that man is.
Did you cry?
I didn't cry. No, I didn't cry.
Really?
No, I kept it together, man.
Damn.
I didn't want to cry in front of the head of my agency.
I think you could have cried either way. Like, yeah, I got it. Or what the fuck, I don't, out of anger. Okay.
No tears for me. It's hard when you're pregnant, by the way. Other pregnant women can attest to that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Not an easy thing to do to control that. But yeah, so I ended up promoting. And you know what my mentor said was right. I got put in timeout. Even though I didn't sue the agency and I didn't file a formal complaint and the head of the agency said, hey, this isn't right. I'm going to fix it. Nothing I could prove.
Yeah.
But people talk.
Yeah.
People talk and I hear things.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the deal. None of it matters. Everything happens for a reason. It was a very, very difficult year. The year after I came back. Very difficult year. Nobody would take me out of patrol to a specialized unit. And then one day, a captain took a chance on me. He didn't know me. He only took a chance based upon what one of my mentors told him. That's it. And I'm forever grateful for him for doing that. He 100% altered the direction of my career by taking a chance on a person that he didn't know, by taking me to his administrative lieutenant position. So had he not done that, I don't know that I would have tested for captain. I might have gone to another bureau somewhere else, and who knows? But he 100% altered my career for the better. Had he not taken a leap of faith and listened to somebody else tell him, hey, she's worth it, I don't know that I'd be here right now. So there, again, a man, lots of supporters on that side of it. The two people that hindered my promotion, one was actually a woman. I know who they both are. Neither of them work for the agency anymore, but I never say their names. I knew who they were back when they still worked for the department. Yeah. I don't talk about it because people are not watching what happens to you. They're watching how you handle it.
Ooh, shit. Okay, Michelle, that was fire.
I promised myself that I would operate with dignity and grace no matter what. Every time they told me no, I said, okay, it'll be a yes someday. And I just kept pushing. until one day that captain took a chance on me, and it was a yes. So it was a difficult time, but the adversity I dealt with back then made me who I am now. And it gave me, I help a lot of pregnant women that don't know how to navigate the department. Like I said, we've come a long way. Things are drastically different. The first person to ever get pregnant on our agency was on a list to be a training officer. They literally just removed her from the list.
Oh, damn.
They didn't even put her at the bottom. They just removed her. So when you look at the history, it's like any other large corporation. You have to get people in there. Like our sheriff 100% believes in diversity. He knows that diversity is important. He promoted 3 women to the rank of assistant sheriff in a year. We only have 3 assistant sheriffs, and we had not had a female assistant sheriff before that year. So he gets it. He understands. But until you get people like that get in there that can really start to change the culture, and again, the sheriff before him, the one that gave me my promotion, he clearly understood as well. He knew it wasn't right. So he said, I'm going to fix this. But that's what you need to get a culture change. You need it to come from the top, and you need them to really work at it. But even now when women have questions, I'll get phone calls from people. Hey, I got a pregnant girl that works for me. Can you help her? I'm like, absolutely. Yeah, I love mentoring. I love teaching. I'll help anybody, men, women, whatever. But everything I learned on this department, well, if I can pay that forward so it makes it a little bit easier for one of the women that come after me, then all the adversity was worth it.
You have any siblings?
I have an older sister and a younger brother.
Are they in the force at all?
My older sister works for the department.
Okay.
She's a civilian, an investigative specialist. My brother is a musician, so no, he definitely does not.
Oh.
But he is not my type of music. He does like the screamo type.
Okay.
But he has a following. Like
good for him.
That kid, if you like that type of music, Oni Inc., that's him. He's on Spotify. He's legit.
Say it again.
Oni Inc. Oni Inc.
Okay.
Oni Inc. And he is, again, not my type of music.
Yeah.
But the kid makes a living off it. He supports his family.
Then
He's got a wife and 2 kids.
Then he's fucking doing something, right?
He's doing it.
Like you said, I'm not everybody's cup of tea.
That's right.
Period.
That's right.
As a coach, I'm not everybody's cup of, man, doesn't go off topic, but even when I was coaching at Summerlin, I remember this fucking dude, man, pissed me off. I was still newer. And I remember the music is going and the music started to go down in the gym at Orange Theory. And I'm thinking, oh man, somebody's calling on my phone. I go and turn. This dude
turned it down,
went and touched my phone. I looked at, oh my God, I had to compose. I looked at him dead in the face. I was like, don't you ever touch my shit. Like, what you think this is? You don't go to a doctor's office and just turn down their AC like, hey. But anyways, man, that's fire. Like I said in the beginning, I knew a little bit of who you were and stuff, but here at the speaking event, I heard you talk about, more of all this. And I was just like, I had no idea. Because I can only imagine the things women go through when they're in a male-dominated, like, men have ego, men feel some way, they get flirty, all those kind of things that women have to worry about. I had, who was it had said this? Was it a friend or a client? They said they hate that they feel when they go in somewhere like a workplace or anything, that they got to cover up a certain way so that way men aren't so, like let's say she's more of a bustier girl, she has to make sure, instead of her just being a woman and, going to work, she has to worry like, okay, I got to cover up because these guys are going to stare at me all day. It's fucked up. It's the world we live in.
Yeah.
It is. But man, you're really doing something for a lot of women, especially as a cop. Like one of the fields of like, you got to have, I'm sure, some tough skin mentally and physically to go through not only the stuff with civilians, but also, like you said, within the force. You ever been shot at?
No, I haven't. Thank God.
Oh, okay.
I've not been
you ever
shot
shot
at.
somebody?
No, thank God.
And how'd you meet Sasha? How did you guys come across?
Actually, I met Sasha in the academy. She was one of my TAC officers.
Nice.
I didn't know. I was scared to death of her because, that's what they do. They're supposed to be mean, angry, and yell at you.
Yeah.
So I met her there, and she's mentored me my entire career. She was the captain at Summerlin Area Command when I went over there for day shift. She was the captain to open it, and I ended up going over there. And that's what really, that's when the mentorship took off. Like, she's always mentored me, and I could call her for advice anytime, meet up with her. I tell a funny story because when I was trying to decide if I should test for lieutenant, I met up with her and I said, hey, I wanted to ask you, should I test for lieutenant? And she was like, no. She straight up. She's like, no, I don't think you're ready. I think you should do something else as a sergeant before you do it. And I was like, stunned. Well, I made the decision to test anyway.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh my God, I gotta tell my mentor that I'm not following her advice. Then I went, I had coffee with her again, and I said, hey, I just want to let you know I made the decision to test. And she was like, good for you. You're going to be a great lieutenant. And I'm like, what the? But she understood, like, you can provide advice, but you don't get to get angry if the people you mentor don't take it. Like, you're just there as a coach, as a guide. It's up to them to really make all the decisions for their career. And so she gave me the autonomy to do that. But that's how I met her, was way back then. And then we became closer friends. I would say after I worked for her at Summerlin, because our kids became really good friends.
Okay.
Our kids became best friends. So Sasha and I became best friends. And, you know, I loved her husband, best friends with her husband as well.
Yeah.
So it just kind of, it went from there. But
I see him time to time at the gym. At Lifetime, I'll see him randomly and say what's up to him.
yeah.
But yeah, she's a beast too, man. Having you two in class, it was like, oh shit.
Well, it doesn't help that we're competitive with each other either.
Yeah.
So we would go back and forth with each other, trying to see who could lift more, be faster, you know, all the things.
You know, it's crazy. What would go through my head every time I would see you guys working out. I'm thinking like, damn, they getting ready to go fuck some shit up in the streets. Like they're preparing for it here, damn near, right? Like your endurance, your strength, and all that. Now with, you said you mentioned you had 4 kids, and then you have 2 with your current partner.
Yes.
Okay, girlfriend. And how is it having, or do you have all 6 at one time?
Her oldest is 19 now and in the Army, so he's out of the house.
He's out of the, okay.
And then her youngest is 17, a senior, but her and I don't live together yet.
Okay.
She actually just ran for school board. She got it, so we won't live together for a while because she has to stay in Henderson. She's Henderson based, I'm Summerlin based, and we make it work.
Yeah.
It's not a fun drive.
Yeah.
But, you know, she has aspirations and things that she wants to do, and I'm never going to hold her back.
I love that.
And she knows that I have this house and my kids are happy, and I'm staying up in that area because I love it, and she would never hold me back. So we figure out a way to make it work. But the kids all interact very well together. We weren't sure how it would go with teenagers and littles, especially because I only have one boy. So when
you have 1 boy and 3 girls.
I have 3 girls, 1 boy.
The boy's oldest?
The boy is 3rd in line. So he's a middle child on top of it.
Yeah.
When he found out he was getting older brothers, that kid was so excited. And he's typical, like, jump on you. Like, and I was like, oh God, these teenagers are not going to want to be around him. They adore my kids. I'm very grateful, very lucky. They're good boys.
And you're Mexican?
Yes, I am.
Full?
Half Hispanic.
What else does that have?
My mom is like everything white you could think of from Europe.
Okay.
That's my mom.
And then your dad's Mexican? Where's your dad from?
Well, he was born in California.
LA?
But actually. His parents are from Mexico, and I think his mom was from Greece, if I remember correctly.
Okay. And what high school did you go to?
I went to Bonanza.
Graduated from there?
Bonanza Bengal. I sure did.
Oh, shit.
Sure did.
Okay. Man, for you with each, or actually, if you don't mind explaining the rankings.
Sure.
Because I was unaware of who's at the bottom, I don't call bottom, but the starting point and then the very top of the command.
Every agency is a little different.
Okay.
Metro is unique because we're a combined police department and sheriff's department. In the early 70s, city and county merged to make LVMPD.
Oh.
So we're actually run by an elected sheriff, but we have police officers. Usually when you have police officers, you have like a chief that's appointed.
Okay.
One of the many, many benefits we have by being run by an elected sheriff is our sheriff only answers to the people that elected him. Whereas when you have a chief that's appointed by a mayor, you sometimes have to worry about being unappointed by the mayor if you don't do what the mayor wants. Our sheriff does what's right and what's best all of the time. That is his goal. And he doesn't have to worry about somebody taking his job away for doing it.
Yeah.
On the ranking system on my agency, starts with police officer. Detective is not really a rank. You get a little extra money, but it's not considered rank. So it's police officer, police sergeant, police lieutenant, police captain. After captains, you get into what we have called deputy chiefs. There are 6 of those on our department, 6 deputy chiefs. And then you have an assistant sheriff, 3 assistant sheriffs, an undersheriff, and a sheriff. We also have like little side ranks, like we have a civilian who's kind of 3rd in command. He's our chief administrative officer.
Okay.
And then we have a chief of staff, but those are kind of like little individualized different ranks that we have.
So right now you are a captain.
Captain.
And next up would be chief.
That's not a testable position though.
Okay.
The sheriff appoints the chiefs. If Kevin ever decides to do that for me, I would work my butt off for him the same as I do now. I don't work for what job I could have. I work for the job that I have. And that's really, really important so that my people never feel like I'm not there for them, because I need to be there for them. That's my role.
Let me ask you something. So when you're an officer, back, let's say like when all the defund the police stuff, all that stuff was going down, all that crazy race shit and fuck the cops, you know, all that. As a police officer at that time, how was that for you?
Very difficult.
Because I know for us, civilian wise, we can say we want F the police, this and that. And me personally, I never felt that way to a certain extent. You know what I mean? Because I've known people like you. I have other friends who are also officers. And it's like, you can't sit there and just put the whole thing on, you know, whole job based off, you know, what's been happening. And yeah, if you could talk a little about like what was going through your mind and like a few of the challenges you had to deal with.
I think one of the hardest things, I mean, listen, we had an officer shot during I won't call it a protest, it was a riot. It turned into a riot. We had an officer shot and paralyzed. When you think about the senselessness behind that act, we as an agency, we will help anybody protest. We understand what a First Amendment right is. You have freedom of speech. You may not even agree with what they're doing, but every person on my agency will stand out there and protect them no matter what. But there is a difference between a civil protest and civil disorder or a riot. And we will never stand for that. And like I said, we ended up having one of our officers, a good cop, ends up getting paralyzed for the rest of his life now because of that. It was really hard to go through, really hard to watch. I had a cop that worked with me at Summerlin at the time, and he was Black. He was a good cop, and he got so much pressure from his family for his job that he resigned. He said, I just can't do it anymore. I can't keep taking this from my family. And that, again, diversity. We want to mirror our community.
Well, real quick, so I'm assuming, I don't know the situation with him, but I'm assuming his family's probably pressuring him like to
Correct.
go against I don't go against his job, but kind of like pick a side type thing.
Correct.
Wow.
And we want diversity on our agency. We want to mirror the community. We want people feel more comfortable seeing somebody that looks like them or
100%.
has experiences like them.
100%.
We know that and we want that. We push for it. So when we lose it in a time when we really knew we needed it, like it's tough. And there are a lot of stories out there like that on the agency. And a lot of people had a difficult time getting through it. But like we always do, you know, we pull ourselves up by our bootstraps and we push forward.
You ever felt, I won't say fearful, but like when you were out of uniform and kind of like maybe there was a situation that went bad at some point during your career, like you're going to run into that guy while you're, you know, walking the street normally? You ever felt like, even to this day, you ever feel like, oh shit?
All the time.
Really?
Cops, especially policing where you live is a unique thing. I think all cops on some level suffer from probably a little bit of PTSD. Not necessarily something that you would, I'm no psychiatrist by the way, but not something you would need treatment for by any means. But there's a reason we all sit with our backs to the walls or facing the door at a restaurant. That's never going to go away. That's going to be there for the rest of our lives. We're highly aware of things. We pay close attention to detail. We're always paying attention to our surroundings. Cops don't like big crowds. Like we don't want to be in a big crowd. I remember having my kids. I had my two oldest at the grocery store. And I had a guy walk up to me. And he walks up and he said, gosh, I remember, I wish I could remember his exact wording, but he said something like, what beautiful, pure children. Now, my kids don't look as dark as I do.
Yeah.
The donor that we used is white, so they're whiter than I am. And my oldest has blonde hair. So he makes this comment, and I look up at him, and I can see he's got Nazi tattoos on him.
Oh, wow.
Immediately, I'm like, we got to go.
Oh.
So I grab my kids, and I beeline, and I'm like, let's go. I'm like, we got to get out of here. Like, I'm not going to have an encounter with this guy in the grocery store right now because I operate differently than your everyday average civilian.
Yeah.
I'm armed. I know that, but I don't have all the protection of my bulletproof vest or my gun belt or all these things. So there are always times that I'm nervous about running into someone that I've put. In fact, I remember at Walmart, I had someone turn around and go, Tavarez, right? Oh. And I'm looking at this girl and I'm like, oh no. Cause I knew there's no way I met her at the gym.
Yeah.
And I was like, uh-oh. And she was like, and I was like, that's me. And I didn't have my kids with me.
Yeah.
But I was on guard. I try to operate with empathy. So I waited and she goes, "You might not remember me. You arrested me once." And I said, "I did." I said, "You're right. I don't remember you." She goes, "I got to tell you, it's the best thing that ever happened to me."
Ooh.
And I was like, "Oh, thank God." But I did. I had arrested her for some petty drug charge.
Yeah.
And that's what prompted her to get clean. The fact that she remembered me was like, oh my gosh. A lot of people tell me I don't look anything the same outside of uniform as I do in uniform. But she recognized me. And I was just grateful that that was where it went and not a different direction. You know, and I was grateful that I kind of gave her the opportunity to speak because again, I really try, you know, hey, let's see what they're going to say. Operate with empathy. Don't jump to conclusions if you don't have to. So I was really glad that I did because that's what she came out there with. And I was like, oh, well, I'm really happy that you were able to turn your life around and you were able to go a different direction.
That's fucking amazing.
So yeah, that was pretty cool.
Shout out to her taking accountability.
She
could have easily looked at you and be like,
she
you
absolutely
motherfucker,
took
you ruined my
accountability.
life. Yeah. And kind of similar to the question I asked earlier, you know, me as a kid growing up, I'm sure you as well, there's always been like the stigma of, you know, cops being bad, right? Not always. I'm sorry.
There has been, but not always.
Yeah.
Good. I was about to correct you.
Yeah. But like, so it's me as a kid growing up, low income area, you know, and I was very young when the Rodney King thing happened and all that. But just what can people do, people or even officers out there that aren't in Las Vegas, but who might watch and they're somewhere else, do to help change any of that type of stigma that might still be there?
I mean, listen, I'm not going to pretend like we don't have bad cops because we do. Our agency holds them accountable. We don't tolerate bad cops ever. Some agencies are getting better at it, but could be better. And you have cops that do absolutely despicable things.
Yeah.
And I won't tolerate it. I don't tolerate it. And I don't have any love for those because they tarnish the badge and they give all of us a bad name. There's nothing more a good cop hates than a bad cop. We don't like them. We're out there trying really hard to do it right, and they're giving us a bad name. So I'm not going to pretend that people haven't had bad experiences with the police. I'm sure people have had bad experiences with people here on LVMPD.
Yeah.
Couple things I would like to remind folks out there is, one, not all cops are created equal. So don't judge one based upon your interaction. You know, don't judge others based upon your interaction with one. That's unfair. That's what people say we do to them, which is unfair. So don't do that. And then two, if you did have a bad interaction or you do feel like your rights were violated, you have recourse, especially here. You have a right to make a complaint. We will investigate it. We will push forward and move through to make sure we hold our cops accountable. Don't be afraid to do that. Don't think nothing will happen. Whatever you do, don't stop calling us. Please don't. If you need us, call us because we will come and help you no matter what.
When you said that, it's crazy. I saw this. There's a show called forgot the name. It's on the YouTube channel called Jubilee, and it's 20 verse 1. So it's different categories, different kind of. For example, the one I saw, it was one cop and 20 convicted felons.
Oh. And
they all sit in a circle, right? And there's a cop sitting on a table like this, and they ask a prompt. Not all cops are bad. And then whoever feels like right or wrong, they come sit down in front of the cop, and they say what they say, and he says what he says. And it's such an interesting. It's real good because some of the convicts, most of them were very angry and upset, obviously, because they had a bad interaction. And that's one thing he said, what you just said now. He was like, look, you had your bad interaction with that cop. That's not who I am. I don't even live by you. So for you to judge us is like me saying, because you're a black woman, you're like the black woman I had a black interaction with, or the Mexican person I had a bad interaction with. Great show. I'll send it so you can watch it. It was just interesting to hear. He was very composed. I'll give it to him, the cop who it was. I don't know where he's from or what, but he was very composed and very compassionate. And I like those answers you gave, because I can attest that people like who have met like you and Sasha, got a couple other friends who I know who are also officers. I don't want to just say their name on my thing, because but they're good people, you know, and they got into it to help change the stuff we complain about. And that's one thing that's so interesting to me is people, they complain about a lot of shit, but they don't do anything to go and help change it. So it's not like that no more. Whether that's not necessarily they have to go be a cop, but anything in the community they don't like, you know, anything, just shit like that. One thing I wanted to ask also real quick, we're going to wrap up here in like 3 minutes or so. You mentioned sperm donors.
Yeah.
Were all 4 of your kids?
All the same donor.
Really?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. He's a friend of mine, a known donor. Oh, very, very lucky to have him to be willing to give the way that he did. He's the reason I'm a mommy, which is all I ever wanted to be, by the way.
Really?
It's all I ever wanted to be my whole life. People would ask me when I was little, what do you want to be when you grow up? A mommy. That's it. He gave me those beautiful
Is there
babies.
anything you think you could, advice-wise to somebody, a female, who's coming up in a male-dominated work field to help them, you know, stay focused and believe they can continue to go up the ranks, whether that's a police officer, corporate, you know, any kind of...
First thing I would say is you might think it's the right time, but the universe has another plan. You have to have faith in the universe. I really thought when I tested for sergeant the first time, it was the right time for me to be a sergeant. It was not. The universe knew better. Everything happens for a reason at the right time. I cannot tell anybody whether or not they should push forward and make a formal complaint, but I'm never going to tell them not to fight for what they believe in either. You just have to be ready to deal with what comes from it. It's not always easy. I don't get mad if women say, nope, I'm not going to move forward, because I know how hard it was for me. And not all women want to push forward with that. But remember that you have allies in some men. I can't say it enough. There are tons of men that support us. Find your allies and use them. Don't do to the men what people do to you, which is, again, paint you with that broad brush. Everybody's the same, because they're not. Build those relationships. Keep pushing forward. Keep trying. My opinion is it's no for now. That's it. When someone tells me no, I think it's no for now. I'll get you in a year or two. You let me, I'm going to keep trying. It's no for now.
That's amazing. That's beautiful. And you mentioned to me earlier before we hopped on that do you have something coming up? Anything you want to announce? Any kind of drives or anything you're doing?
Oh, no, not right now. No,
Okay.
we just finished one.
Okay.
But no, not currently, but I appreciate you giving me the platform to do
No, yeah.
that.
You have anything you want to share before we wrap up?
I don't think
Any
so.
announcements or anything? No?
No, I'm not pregnant, so no.
That would have been
no more
crazy.
Babies. No more
Announce
babies.
it here. You don't want no more? You said you want a lot. Get a caravan.
No more. We're good. We're good. We already automatically have gratuity put on our check when we go out as a family. So we're good.
And then as we wrap up, ask his last question is, what's a quote you live by and why?
What a great question. I read a book called The Leadership Challenge. It's written by Kuznets and Posner. I think they're on like the 6th edition now. In that book, one of them wrote, "People will forget what you say, but they will never forget how you made them feel." And I live by that daily. As a leader, you can't just provide lip service. You have to show your folks you're genuinely invested in them. But as a parent, my kids are always watching, always. I tell my kids all the time, the only thing you can control is yourself and how you respond to things. Like I said earlier, people want to drag you down to their level. Don't let them. You don't have to go down to their level. So when I think about that quote, that statement, it was actually one of the best compliments I think I ever got was from my oldest. She was in swim, and I think she was maybe 9 years old at the time. And we were late. I'm late everywhere I go. We're late, and I'm trying to get her to swim practice, and it's nowhere near the house. And I finally get her in there, and we walk in, and I mean, we're hustling, trying to get her to the pool. And I see this little boy, and he's got a $5 bill in his hand. And he was maybe 12, 13, and he's standing at the front desk. And I heard him ask the lady, "Do you have change for a $5?" And she said, "Oh, no, we don't have any money here." And, he went, "Oh." And immediately I thought, oh, this little guy wants something out of a vending machine. That's right where my head goes as a mommy. So I tell my daughter, "Carter, hold on." And I go, "Hey, buddy, do you need change for a $5? I think I have it." And he goes, "Yeah." So he comes over and I dig through my purse and I find my 5 ones and I give them to him. I'm like, "Here you go." And I don't carry a lot of cash, but I'm like, "Here you go." He's like, "Thanks." I said, "No problem." And I'm like, "All right, Carter, let's go." And I go right back into hustle mode. And my daughter looks at me and she goes, "There you are, pulling a mommy." And I said, "What's a mommy? What does that mean?" I'm a huge Friends fan, and all I could think was pulling a Monica, which was a very negative connotation if you watch Friends. And I was like, "What do you mean pulling a mommy?" And she goes, "Well, even though we were late, you knew he needed something, so you stopped to help." I didn't pay any attention to it. I paid no mind. It was just something I would do. But she saw it, and enough for her to comment on it. And it really made me stop and think. And it goes right back to that quote. No matter how many times I say we treat people with love and kindness, which is what I tell my kids, she watched it happen. It made her feel enough for her to comment on it and tell me I pulled a mommy, as she said. When I think about how much effect that can have on a kid growing up or somebody you lead or even your peers or the people above you, because the people above you matter just as much as the people below you. I love that quote for that reason.
That's beautiful. And I agree. I think it's very important to, you don't forget how people make you feel. You know, I can think of a lot of experiences throughout my life. People have said things, obviously they feel good, but then somebody just makes you feel a way. It's like, I'll go to war for that person to this day. Well, thank you, Captain.
Thank you for having me.
Michelle Tavarez, for making time today, for coming on today. Thank you for sharing your story, sharing wisdom. You made some good shit today.
Thank you.
And yeah, thank you guys for tuning in to another episode of the BambooSZN podcast. Like she said, people, don't forget how you make them feel. When you see this and hear this, go make somebody feel good. Even if it's yourself, look in the mirror, make yourself feel good. You deserve it, baby. 2 words, keep growing.